So, first of all, the Burn spiritual tradition is one of the oldest spiritual tradition of Tibet. Sometimes it's referred as an indigenous spiritual tradition or indigenous religion. Claims about 17,000 years back in history, from founded by Lord Sharamyambo and came to Tibet, and during many Tibetan kings, the Burn was the only spiritual tradition in Tibet which was practiced by all the yogis, masters, also practiced by the royal families, higher in society, everybody, and also was very, later on it was also very spread more in a public cycle, both in a monastic system and lay community. I always say that Burn is one of the richest spiritual tradition because it's very, it completes from all aspect of teachings, such as from like very basic raw elements, from the shamanic teachings to very high teachings like Dzogchen, the teachings of self-liberation, which were only transmitted by a master to student and on a very small circle of groups, or sometimes some part of the history only one master taught only to one students, and that way it's still that's very narrow lineage is still alive and complete even today in Tibet and India, and I have the fortunate to bring these teachings to the West. And also a lot of forms of healing practices, working with raw element, enormous amount of respect to the nature, the understanding of the nature, the understanding of the power of the spirits in the nature, understanding herbs and healings, rituals. In a way, there are so many aspects of pre-Hispanic traditions, or many Native American, both in South and Northern America, all the Native American tradition, there are a lot of similarities, and which has been also one of my interests to see what kind of similarities are there, and what kind of how much we can in these different indigenous people can share this knowledge with each other. So this is a very rich tradition, and of course historically the Burn tradition has went through many different time changes, like every other spiritual tradition or any other people's life in the country, where it all goes through all kind of ups and downs. Before even Chinese came, before even the Buddhists came, during some of the royal families king time, the power struggles, there was a lot of, at one point was a decline, but still kept very alive later on. Then in the 7th century, when the Buddhism from India first introduced to Tibet, and was very hard to introduce to Tibet because all the Tibetans were only Burn practitioners, and teachings were very strongly rooted in their culture and their belief. The Indian tradition coming from India was very more intellectual, so it was very hard to change. So there was some degree of persecution during that time. So when afterward, obviously Chinese came and then went through one. So nevertheless, these teachings, tradition has been very alive. These teachings has been kept very alive, and after 1959, when all the Tibetans people came to India, about 100,000 Tibetans came to India, many among elder burn masters like Geshe Tenzin, Tenzin Wangyal, His Holiness, a number of elders. They try to keep these things together, alive. So that was the number one priority, to let all the communities stay together, all the monks and lamas stay together, and to see how to preserve. Maybe this is the only seed, only knowledge to reconnect back in the future in history, back to Tibet, because Chinese was a threat to destroy everything in Tibet, the monasteries, the spiritual objects and the literature and the knowledgeable people and the yogis in the caves, and just everything is possible was getting destroyed. So the chance to keep these things alive, and that one of the ways to do that was to train the younger generations, which is my generation. First generation was trained completely by Yongdzin Rinpoche. So, and also His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for right from the beginning, encouraged many times. He's a close friend with the Yongdzin Rinpoche, my teacher, and also encouraged many times to him, saying, it's your responsible to preserve, and I'll help. And he's throughout many times he helped number of times financially, and many different supports to visiting there, and so a number of supports. So basically from last 15-20 years, these elders managed to make this next bridge, and that the outcome is my generation. So now it's continuing. So which is in my situation, it's somehow happened that hard work. One way it's fortunate being some kind of historical person here to bring this knowledge to many different countries around the world, in many different places. The language and culture is totally different. Belief system is completely different, but still trying to bring this knowledge and inspire people enough that everybody have like something deeply connected to this teaching, as this teaching was already aware their own existence, knowledge, some previous life. Maybe I'm sure that sometime there's a lot of connections there. So that's the kind of overview. Well, I have been as a very young, around age 10, entering into the monastery and being recognized as a reincarnation of Chontrul Rinpoche by Geshe Tenzin, and trained under him, under other two teachers, under Yongdzin Rinpoche, very strictly for 15-20 years. Went through all the monastery trainings, the intellectual training, the transmissions and initiations, all the experiential teachings. And at very early age, around 18, 19, I already took responsibility to teach, because that at the time, Yongdzin Rinpoche was the only one who was teaching, and he needed somebody else to teach. So I already began while I was studying to teach, helping him. And in 1986, I've completed my Geshe degree, which is the highest degree in the monastic education system, which is like equivalent to PhD on theology. And as a very young, I've been very interested in learning. I've published few books before the age of 30, and I never particularly thought to come and teach in the West, but I was interested to come and do further study in the West, and inspired by Yongdzin Rinpoche again, everything, because he was in Oxford for quite a number of years, and he was telling all the stories and how old people still continuously study without having boundaries of age. One of the professor who was over 75 learning Tibetan alphabet. While he's learning writing alphabet, he's trembling his hand, but every week, few classes that he takes, he would never miss any classes, was great inspiration for me. So I was always wanted to meet those kind of people and study further. And that was primary reason to just come. And as I came, many people who knew me back home wanted to come and teach here, teach there, and that how it just continued and became my life busy and which is I'm happy of. So last 10 years, this Breve teaching has been worldwide spread everywhere. And these teachings went everywhere because it was not like I was trying to put effort to spread these things. It was more like people want so much these teachings, so I went not like trying to convince anybody to do anything. So that went all over the country. So, and because of Ligmicha and all my organizations that I have created, on the basis of that, we brought many wonderful teachers, and including His Holiness Wangyal Rinpoche, many other lamas, opening the door, primary door for all the teachers to the West, and so that they can also help other people. And so that's kind of a little bit my work, and especially like in Mexico, which has been a wonderful experience for me. There's always people seems very close to Tibetans, and as whatever they believe, their trust, they're in love with rituals, they're in love with the blessing pills and waters, elements, and just everything, much more than the intellectual ideas about things. So they were very much more earthy aspect. There were so much similarities. And last many years that I've been as teaching down there, I have been wonderful experiences and a lot of students. So I tend to continue to support that and bring more teachers to support continuously what I'm doing there.